Welcome to the Self-Control Show, a podcast for men. If you get defensive, shut down, or find yourself going 0 to 100, you're in the right place. Most men were never taught how to regulate their emotions. And this show is about changing that. It's not therapy, and it's not fluff. It's training. I'm your host, Jason Schnitzer. Let's get to work. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Got a great one for you today. And what I'm going to talk about is the fastest way to rebuild trust in your marriage. And really, I think one of the biggest misconceptions out there is how trust actually gets broken. A lot of guys think, hey, trust is broken by these like grandiose things, cheating, infidelity, breaking promises, etc. And usually this type of trust that gets broken, right? It's not usually because you're like a bad husband, right? It's broken because your system is usually overwhelmed and on overload, your nervous system, right? It's broken in 1,000 tiny incidents where, you say things like, hey, you'll change or that won't happen again, right? And in the moments when you make these promises, you really mean it, right? But what happens is that you don't end up doing it or you don't follow through. Part of this is understanding why, right? And understanding like why the little things actually turn into such big things, especially like, how this practically shows up is like your wife will be like, oh my gosh, you didn't take the trash out, right? And then that turns into an argument and you're looking at it like, it's not that big of a deal. Why is it such a big deal, right? And the reason why it's such a big deal is that usually it's something deeper, right? Trust equals safety to pretty much everybody, but especially your wife. And what your wife's system, nervous system, is constantly asking, right, in the relationship, whether you know it or not, it's like, can I rely on him, right? Can I predict him? Can I trust his word? And when you have that, well, that trust creates safety, right? Safety creates connection. And connection is ultimately what creates intimacy between the two of you. Because if you don't have that connection, it's the thing that blocks you from physical connection, right? Which is where a lot of guys see this. It's like, I'm not intimate as much as like I want to be with my wife, right? And all the grandiose vacations, the nice cars, nice house, the dates, etc. It's almost like they don't matter if you don't have this thing. That's why I'm talking about it and why it's generally the quickest way to get back into that, rebuilding this type of like emotional trust. And here's the pattern, right? She brings something up, you feel criticized, pressure, discomfort, that not enough feeling like you're failing, and you get activated, right? And you immediately, instead of just being able to like regulate the emotions that come up, say and do things like I'll do better, you get right into fix mode, you get right into like promising, sometimes over promising, right? And a lot of times you don't really even think that through, right? Because what you're ultimately trying to do is regulate your own discomfort with action. And that's not necessarily what she's actually asking for, right? And it's more of an internal thing where you're trying to stop kind of like what you're feeling and this uncomfortable experience of, letting your wife down, disappointing your wife. Some guys actually feel like they're in trouble, right? Which is a whole different thing, right? And you could be like in a lot of ways a really good dude, have the best intentions, right? And a lot of times you'll think like, I need to be more disciplined, I need to try harder, and that's just wrong, right? This is a regulation problem, an emotional regulation problem, right? That turns into an overwhelm problem, that turns into an avoidance problem, right? You commit to doing something while you're really activated in hopes to resolve the thing for you, right? But what happens is that activation leaves you stuck with a commitment that ultimately kind of gets put on the back burner, right? Because that decision, that choice didn't come from a really grounded place. It came from like a survival response, like, oh my gosh, I'll do anything to get out of this, right? And then what happens is you're good for like a week or two, sometimes a month, but then it happens all over again, right? And the shift that you want to make and the fastest way to start rebuilding trust here is to understand that like, hey, when you are able to regulate your own emotions, that equals being trustworthy, right? And this is key, because what that allows you to do in those moments is just hear her criticism, hear her complaints as feedback, right? To be able to tolerate the tension that it creates when you're in conflict, and be able to stay in that discomfort and think clearly in that discomfort, right? Before committing to the next step. And in a lot of ways, maybe sometimes there is no commitment needed, right? It's just an understanding and a listening to. And when you don't have that, you do things like you appease, right? You tell her what she wants to hear, right? Or what you think she wants to hear. You overpromise, avoid, disappear, sometimes get defensive, blow up, etc., right? But with regulation, what you can do is you can create consistency, right? Consistency builds trust, trust builds that emotional safety, right? So instead of promising harder, right, what we want to do in a hard moment where there's a rupture is be able to control our reactions to our own emotions, right? And practically be able to take a pause. And instead of like, okay, I'll do it, I'll take care of it, it's like, you know what? Let me think about that. Let me take a day, right? Or it's like if practically you can't do the thing, right? It's like, hey, you know what? I don't know if I have the capacity to do that right now, right? Or you know what? I'll get back to you tomorrow on what I think about this, right? And when you're able to be honest and give yourself a little time, even though it might be difficult, right? Honesty is the thing that creates safety, right? Even though it's a hard thing to say and you still say it because it's true, right? That is going to create short-term discomfort, right? Because maybe you're telling her something that she doesn't want to hear. But what it does is create long-term trust, right? And you're not going to be able to do this unless you know how to regulate your emotions. And I hear it all the time. You know, wives will be feeling like they're walking on eggshells. Be good for like a month, and then all of a sudden, bang, out of nowhere, like I'll lose it over a little thing. And I just don't want that to happen anymore. And the fact is like what's happening is that in those hard moments, you're not able to recognize the emotions that are coming up for you, and they just take you over and they take you out. So, what you need to be able to do is to be able to recognize and identify your own emotions, right? So they don't take you out. Because a lot of times it's like, well, you don't even know what's going on with you. So you don't trust you. And if you don't trust you, how is anybody else supposed to trust you, especially your wife, right? And because here's the deal is like most wives aren't expecting you to be perfect, right? All they want you to do is be able to, or all they want to do is be able to trust that you've got it, right? Even when it's hard, even when you're stressed out, even when you're tired. And when you are able to regulate your emotions, so like rebuilding trust, the fastest way to do it is to be able to regulate your emotions. So you're not reactive in the hard moment, so that you can break the pattern and break the cycle of maybe even saying yes when you mean to say no. Because a lot of times afterwards, you're like, man, why did I do that? Why did I commit to that? The hardest part is when you couple that with a history for a lot of guys of, you know, getting things right and doing a good job is sort of like their North Star for am I a good boy, basically, right? And what it's really doing dynamically in the relationship is like making your wife your mom, and she's not your mom, right? So there's like this internal thing that's going on here that needs to be sorted through, understood, and your ability to regulate your emotions as they come up is going to help you do that so that you can start showing up differently, right? And when you start showing up differently, even when she expects you or your kids expect you to show up a certain way, whether that's reactive, whether it's like Mr. Fix It, whether it's Mr. Defensive, right? Or Mr. Shutdown. And all of a sudden you're there and you're present, right? And you're able to hang in that tension, right? Maybe hear her without fixing, right? Maybe like really take your time to respond. And like when you do respond, it's like, yeah, I'm going to commit to this. And this is going to be something that is a small thing that I'm gonna add as a new level to how I'm showing up in my relationship, in my marriage. Ultimately, you're going to be making a decision to do that from a more grounded, a more regulated place. And what that is ultimately going to give you is a more consistent, stable behavioral way of showing up, where the old pattern becomes like the exception, right? Nobody's perfect, but it's kind of the exception. And when it shows up, it's not this big, crazy thing, right? And part of being able to regulate your emotions, again, I know I'm kind of going back to beating this horse, if you will, is being able to recognize them. And when you recognize them, you can express your feelings in a way that are more direct, as opposed to them coming out passive aggressively, right? As opposed to like a deep sigh, slamming a door, hitting a wall. Instead, being able to just say, you know what, I'm really upset right now, right? Or I'm angry right now at you and I need a minute. Or I'm having a really hard day and I just want you to know it's not you. And I'm just having a hard day right now. And what I need is some time to myself. What I need is to go on a walk right now. What I need is to, you know, be able to play my video game or whatever it is, or go to jujitsu or do my hobby, whatever it is for you to be able to fill your cup up. But the key again is to recognize that that is what you need, right? Your responsibility to know that, and then ask for what you need and give yourself what you need, right? And that is the quickest way to rebuild trust, is recognizing basically like what you need, recognizing when your emotions are starting to come out and come up and take you out, so that that doesn't bleed over, spill over onto the people that are closest to you, aka your wife, aka your kids, right? Because generally speaking, what happens is everybody else kind of gets the best version of us, and then our wife and kids get this other alter version where, you know, people at work, your friends, if they saw you at home, would go like, "What? Who is that person?" Right? I would never have expected that from him, which is not the way that we want to show up. It's not the way that I know that you want to show up either, right? Again, when you show up as a regulated man, right? And you can regulate your emotions. You're not just there to tell her what she wants to hear, right? You're not just there to appease and to get it right. You are there as an equal. It's like you're stepping into your power in a lot of ways, right? As a partner. And what that does is it helps take the emotional load from her, because a lot of wives feel like, and I hear it all the time, that they are tiptoeing on eggshells around your reactions or their husband's reactions. And if they could just like relax, knowing that like, hey, they could just feel their feelings and bring them up. And, you know, they were just had a place to have somebody listen to them, not necessarily fix them, right? If they could bring something up and it'd be okay for them to disagree. This is a big one, right? Where you have an opinion and she has an opinion, and if they're different, like there's space to talk about that and go back and forth and pitch and catch, rather than it's like sometimes if we don't know how to regulate our emotions and we say something, she doesn't believe us, she doesn't agree with us, it comes back and hits on like, you don't trust me, I'm feeling rejected, I'm not good enough, why don't you just listen, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden things go sideways and we get reactive, and that feels really emotionally unsafe, because if you can't be honest with somebody, right, and trust that they're not going to be reactive, what happens is you just start censoring yourself, right? You start not trusting that person. And that censorship, if you will, starts building into resentment. And ultimately, again, all this adds up to that death by a thousand cuts, these little things that happen over and over again for years, sometimes decades, right? And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you know, a lot of times it's just like a wife is done. Like it's kind of like bang, just like that. Sometimes it feels like it comes out of nowhere and nothing you can do is right. And there's more to it underneath the surface for them. So why it's so important to understand this is like, as you step into this whole rebuilding trust process in a real way, it is not easy. right? Even though there's maybe a part of her that really wants to believe that you're going to change, right? It is not easy because you are going to face all the things that you have been avoiding, right? But let me tell you, if you can do that, what's on the other side of that is the potential for the closest, deepest, most physically and emotionally intimate relationship that you've ever had, right? But there's no magic bullet, silver bullet way through other than um, through it, doing this work and being able to show up differently, as opposed to say you're going to show up differently and then just like having the pattern repeat. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully it gave you some insight on what is most important. If you see yourself here, again, I'm always here to chat. Reach out, offer a free call to dive deeper on this, to help you understand it better and to see if, I can help. So as always, there is a link in the summary here with a calendar to book a call. Thanks for listening, you guys. Catch you on the next one.